Hello and welcome. I'm Erin Cuthbert, footballer for Chelsea and the Scotland national team, and you're listening to the Blue Day podcast.
Fellow Chelsea supporters, on behalf of the Blue Day podcast, I am delighted to introduce our guest on the show today. He made 106 appearances for the club, scoring 2 goals. He was part of the squad that won the 1997 FA Cup and the 1998 Cup Winners' Cup. Plus, he played alongside the likes of Craig Burley, Steve Clarke, and Dennis Wise. Here is Andy Myers. Andy, welcome to the show. How are we today?
I'm good, thanks, Keith. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm good.
Brilliant. I just want to start the interview, Andy, if I can, as I've asked so many of my guests on the show. What inspired you to become a professional footballer?
It's funny, actually. I think as a kid, it's always been your dream. I think growing up, playing on the estate with the older boys, back then it was probably, 3 channels if you were lucky, BBC One, BBC Two, ITV. And if you got a chance to look at any football, you were lucky. And that was mainly my introduction, was just playing on the estate with the boys and just enjoying it, really. All the things that we're not allowed to do now because no ball game signs get put up. It's all sort of modified and restricted, whereas we were just kids playing every day when we had a ball, just getting up, getting out early and just playing football.
And who were your idols growing up?
It was, to be fair, when you look at the England era there, it was Kevin Keegan, obviously Pele was about, but I think my introduction to the World Cup would have been '82, and you're looking at the likes of Zico, right, Falcao, that Brazilian team. Then you're going, wow. And I think that was probably where you're going at '82, going, oh, there's some players here. I love this. And it's sort of, that World Cup sort of epitomised what football was about for me. It was the one that I remember the most, when Falcao drops a shoulder and hits the top corner and Italy go through on the final, beating Brazil, which I thought was the best team with Socrates and everything else, and thinking they didn't get through to the final, but that's football. And, that was my era, I think, that really made me fall in love even more with football.
Now, I want to touch on sort of the time when you joined Chelsea. You came through the youth ranks at the club. What was that experience like for you?
You know what? It's excellent. I think it's all changed literally from where we were. I think it was under 12 schoolboys signing associated schoolboy forms back then, and getting to the ground and training from what they had then to what they have now to what we had then is completely different. Sometimes we wouldn't know where we would train. I think if you remember sometimes what Chelsea was like, we used to go into the shed end and you had the offices and there'd be the garages where the tractors would be. Sometimes we're training there. Schoolboy training, right? We're not going on the pitch. We couldn't find Battersea. We're in the garage. So you're getting bashed off a wall. But it just reminded you of like playing on the estate with the older boys, and you get beat up, you get beat down. Because I was always training a couple of years older as well. So you just got on with it. Sometimes it'd be Parsons Green if we couldn't train, or it'd be behind the back of the goal, literally at the ground. So there was always something different, and we never knew where we were training, or it'd be Battersea Park and have to run back. So loved it. It just made you grow up.
Now, to fast forward a little bit, you would make your debut for the Chelsea first team, albeit as a sub, in a 3-3 draw with Luton Town at Stamford Bridge. Do you have much memories of your debut for the club?
Yeah, I do, because I remember at the time, I think it was the game where Bobby Campbell decided that he was going to leave a few, as he would call them, the big heads out.
Right.
Yeah, and he did. In all fairness, he did. And so literally, he put me on the bench. I think Frank made his actual debut that day, Frank Sinclair. It might have been his full debut. I can't remember. But literally, I remember being on the bench and being 3 down. And I could remember the fans were literally livid with the result. It was like the fans were going mad. And all of a sudden, second half, all the youngsters from Damien, Cundy, Bobby Stewart started just producing, and we got to 3-2. And I remember getting on, it was through, and just running around with enthusiasm. And by the end of the game, you just go, wow, the crowd from where they changed from where they were at halftime to where they were at the end of the game. And I think it just showed what there was in terms of quality of youth that was there, that were ready to go and fight for the shirt, being 3 down and digging in and still getting a result against a good team in Luton at the time. And it just showed like there was a good crop of youngsters coming through at the club at that time.
You mentioned Bobby Campbell. What was he like for you as a coach?
Bobby was great. In all fairness, I think, if he believed in you, he'd give you that opportunity. And for me, being as young as I was, 17, and getting that opportunity to play and being on the bench and bringing me on, it's something that you only dream of. And I think as a kid, you're always saying at the age, like, oh, I want to be a professional footballer. And I think when that comes, the adrenaline takes over, the rush, everything around it. And Bobby believed in you. He would give you a chance. He was very straightforward, very straight talking, but knew what he wanted, and very good man management. I thought for that time of year, that era, yeah.
Now, your first start for Chelsea would come in late 1991. It would be against Liverpool of all teams, and you'd end up scoring in that game as well to make the scoreline 2-1. That must have given you a huge confidence boost, albeit having just a number of games under your belt and then having that stroke of luck of scoring against Liverpool, who at that time was still a class act.
Yeah, it was quite funny that because I had no idea. Literally, I was in the squad, and I think I've been in the squad previous and was not involved. And I remember walking in, and Stan Turner was the assistant at the time, and I'm just walking in. Hi Stan, you okay? He goes, you okay? Yeah, you sleep well? I went, yeah. He goes, good, because you're playing. And I went, huh? And it was sort of that moment. And the reason I think they'd done that was so I didn't worry the day before. So I slept, relaxed, and come in. And yeah, in all fairness, it was a massive highlight for me. And, to score as well, and playing left wing, which is a position that I was favouring at the time. I've been centre mid, then left wing, and absolutely to score. And again, I remember playing up against Rob Jones, and it was a hell of a battle. I think Ian Pearce made his debut that day as well. And it was just, to have that trust from Ian Porterfield at the time and give me that full debut along with Stan, it was an amazing feeling for me. So loved every minute of it. And yeah, it's a great memory.
You mentioned Ian Porterfield as well. What was the difference in coaching techniques or the philosophy between Bobby Campbell and Ian Porterfield? Were they quite alike, or was it chalk and cheese?
I think they probably would have had similarities. I think Ian Porterfield was straight talking as well, but I think at the time we'd inherited better players, not better players. I'd say we got some bigger names in, so the team was looking a little bit different as well. So he had to probably manage different egos in a certain way, So if you look at the likes of Vinnie Jones, I think was involved. You got Wisey, Andy T. You had a lot of players there that had come. Paul Elliott. There was a lot of players that he had to sort of manage through in that era. So again, different skills, but again, the team just drew together and would bring out these big results. And it started to just show as we were going along that the improvements in the squad were getting there each year.
Now, you'd make a couple of more appearances over the course of the next 18 months until the 93-94 season, where you started to sort of feature more. Glenn Hoddle was in charge. He came in the summer of 93. Did you have words with him in terms of what your ambitions were or your plans, or did he sort of have conversations with you about what he wanted out of you?
Yeah, I think he had conversation with me. I think leading up to that, I had a lot of injuries and I was in and out as a young kid. I remember after that 91, 96, I literally got injured, and I may have started that season after, got injured 2 weeks before, and I was dogged with injuries. And literally, it turned out, as I'll tell you as we go, within that year, I remember going in for a tackle 2 weeks before and cracking a bone in my ankle and didn't realise. I thought it was ligament damage. And for 4 years, I had a piece of bone floating around in my ankle on a ligament, and I was still playing with it. I come in and Glenn made that decision at the end. He goes, look, I've had a look. He started playing, and there was a point where he said I was no longer needed. Right. And I accepted that, and I ended up training with what would have been the combination squad, the reserves, while Glenn was getting in. And then I think there were some injuries that happened, and I had to get called back in, and I got called back in, and from there, he played me left side of a three. So during my career, I've been left wing, centre mid, left back, and now left wing back or left side centre half. So literally, and alongside David Lee sweeping and me and Michael Dewberry, it sort of worked. And in all fairness to Glenn, he took his hat off and he gave me an opportunity to play more and was more involved. So, it just shows though, sometimes you can actually feel sorry for yourself as a player and just head down and not, or you keep training and keep your standards high. And I think Glenn saw that and just every day going in and give me another opportunity. And to be fair, he believed in me in that. So I was very grateful for him for that.
And later down the line in 1994, you'd make your European debut for Chelsea in the Cup Winners' Cup. This would have been in the 94-95 season. you'd play against Austria Memphis away when we had Johnny Spencer on the show last month with that incredible goal.
Yeah.
You'd make your debut in that game as well. What was that like for you playing in Europe for Chelsea?
It was amazing. I think when you look back on that and you think where we hadn't been in Europe for quite a long time to get back and do what we was doing, and then Spenny pulls out arguably one of the best goals in the European competition. He just went, and I think everybody's trying to chase him. And is he going to square it? Is he going to square it? No, and he calmly goes round and finishes it. And you go, wow. And I can remember the atmosphere in the stadium, and I think the fans, the away fans that travel, which have always been great, were literally just ecstatic. And you're looking around and you go, yeah, you can start to see the beginning of where Chelsea were looking to go. And I think it was a brand of football that we were playing at the time as well was improving. And I think the players that were coming in and doing everything, and you could see that Chelsea were going in the right direction, I thought.
And it would be a few months sort of later, which we fast forward to 1995, Glenn Hoddle would bring in two significant names that, in my opinion, sort of transformed Chelsea's fortunes from one level to the next, which was Ruud Gullit and Mark Hughes. What was that like for you, sort of being able to train with them at Harlington and then featuring them in the first game of the season, the 95-96 season against Everton
Yeah.
at home?
You know what? It's amazing. When Rude came into the building, even Sparky, obviously, I remember playing against Sparky in my first game at Old Trafford. And I remember playing against Konchelskis and Brian Robson. I remember actually in that game, I put in a tackle on Brian Robson that he got injured and had to go off. Konchelskis I'd done well against, but Mark Hughes never forgot the challenge on Brian Robson. So it was quite interesting. So I remember a ball was coming in the air and I didn't see Sparky come across and he just, boom, elbowed me in the side of the head. And it was one of them. That was for my mate. And I thought, okay, welcome to the game. And that was literally, you could say my introduction to what it was about, I think. And he made me feel that in all fairness, Sparky did. But when he turned up, there was a presence. And, when he stepped on the field, he was an animal in terms of, he was a nightmare for centre halves. He was strong, aggressive, could finish, wasn't the best finisher in training, but when it comes to the games, when it comes to volleying as well, immense. And as for Ruud, I think to get a signing like Ruud, regardless of if he was coming to the latter stages of his career, you could see the quality of him when he stepped on a field. He was a man mountain, and he improved everybody's games. And sometimes in football they say, the run makes the pass, but with players of his level, his pass would make the run. So he could go point. Next thing you know, you'd be running and he's putting it on a dime, especially if I was playing left wing back. And yeah, he was something else. You could just see it. And to see it up there close and personal was something else.
And we was quite close that season. I know in one game in particular, the semi-final against Manchester United at Villa Park.
Yeah.
We got into the lead with Ruud Gullit, and then Man United sort of bounced back, and there was a couple of sort of mistakes that were made within sort of the Chelsea team. But we was close in that game.
That game, I look back on that. The pitch was horrendous, and if anything could go wrong, it did go wrong. I think Philo got injured, Clarkey got in, Dubes had to go and play in right wing back. Dubes hits the bar of his left foot, didn't go in, and then the goal that did go in was so soft, and it was just, we were so into the game, and I think we had them worried to a point. And I actually thought at one point we were going to do it, but then if anything could go wrong for us in that game, it did in terms of injuries, and it just seemed to have that little bit of effect and give them that edge in that game. But yeah, that was a very, very disappointing game for us in terms of I thought we should have got more out of it, and we were unlucky.
Fast forward a couple of months, Glenn Hoddle would leave to take the England job. Ruud Gullit would come in as player coach. What was your thoughts on that at the time?
Wasn't sure. Obviously, when Ruud comes in, he can bring in a caliber of player as well. I think, having played with Ruud, and he was sometimes sweeping, and I'd be left side or left wing back when he was playing under Glenn. He probably knew what my strengths were and understood, and went from there. I think there was always going to be changes, but it was always something that you know that you've got to train well, you've got to be on it. He expects the same standards Glenn did. It didn't slip, and it was literally, he knew what he wanted, and he had to adapt. You know, you had to adapt. So, and some players could, some players couldn't. And if you didn't, you knew that it was time that he would move you on or the club would move you on because they were going in a different direction.
And at the start of the season, obviously with the new players that were coming in, like Di Matteo, and then later
Yeah.
on it would be Zola, you would sort of still have a hand in that team. You would score away to against Sheffield Wednesday. It was a decent run and a decent finish from you, wasn't it?
It was, to be fair. I remember getting put through and finishing it. And then I think it must have been a couple of weeks later when I scored an own goal. And literally, that was probably a moment I'll just think to myself, but you're playing left wing back. And to be fair, I remember doing that. And then in training, something similar nearly happened after the Liverpool game. And really went mad. And I thought, yeah, you're right. You know, and so his standards were very high, very high. And, you know, to be starting with the caliber of player, you just had to be working every single day because you knew around the corner somebody's ready to go. You know, when you've got Prochescu, you've got Viali that's going to come in, you've got Franco Zola, you've got Di Matteo. What a squad was being built. Frank LeBouf is coming into that eventually as well. You just know that that is a hell of a squad and a hell of a caliber of player that are now looking to step in.
I wasn't going to mention about the own goal, but as you brought it up,
Yeah,
what
nice.
was said after that? Because that was a bit of a torrid game against Liverpool, wasn't it?
You know what? It was one of them games that you look at it and I don't know what it was, but everything they hit went in. And to be fair, I remember on the own goal situation, I remember it coming in as a cross, and I remember getting three calls. I got one from Wisey's time, and then I got one from Hitchy, or two from Hitchy going keepers away. And I wasn't sure. And before you knew it, it was on my head. And I've looked back on it actually, and I've gone, if Hitchy stays, he might catch it, but he comes out near post and I had it middle of goal. And look, it happened. You bury your head in your sand. But ironically, on that, it was one of them games where, and we come in after the game and Rudy went mad. And rightly so as well. He dug a few players out, he dug a few people out, me included, which is fair. But there was a few that he did dig out. And, you know, second half was a lot better than the first, but it was done. We were done.
The game was done, yeah.
It was a horrible performance. Yeah, it was. But yeah, the own goal, yeah, I don't think I'll ever live that down. My boys are always giving me stick about it as well. So, yeah.
Well, to be fair, it didn't sort of deter Chelsea's season too much because we did end up getting to the FA Cup final. You were named on the bench.
Yeah.
Tell us what that day was like for you. You know, when did you know that you'd be involved? What was sort of the whole day's experience like for you, being able to be part of that FA Cup final experience for Chelsea?
Yeah, that was amazing. And because on that campaign, although I'd been in squads, I hadn't been on the bench on that cup run. And I wasn't expecting anything in terms of being involved because literally I hadn't been involved in the cup run. And I remember we stayed over at I think it was the White Lodge, and literally got told that I was going to be on the bench. And the reason that was that if Jorginho had been causing problems, my job was to go on and man mark him. So they wanted me to do a man-to-man marking on Jorginho. That was literally the little Brazilian magician for Middlesbrough. But again, that meant someone missed out. But because Rudy was so adamant on what he wanted and knew and done the homework on them, he felt that this was the best situation when we look around from personnel-wise. If he's going to start causing, what do we do? So my job would have been, so obviously that was my role within the squad, and that's football. And I felt for Craig Burley, because I think he missed out. And I think, but sometimes that's football. It's football. And sometimes, you know, as much as, what do I do? No, I can't, because Craig should be, I'm here to do my job and do as I'm told. So I can understand at times, but being involved in that day, and then, you know, Robbie scores that goal, you're going, wow. And then literally from there, he never really got in the game. And I'm thinking, oh, will I get on? Will I not? Oh, but again, what a day. And, you know, we were unlucky a few years back against United. Well, say lucky, they beat us in the FA Cup. Yeah. But this time we made our point, and yeah, what a day with Eddie popping up as well and scoring a win. It was nice to see a homegrown talent as well get involved and put one in. So what a day.
I bet the after party was interested.
It was, and it was funny because in the after party, and Pele was there.
Oh wow, okay.
I think it was mainly because of Rude, probably. You know, you look at it, but walking around and there's Pele. So yep, it was my opportunity to get a little photo. Me and Michael Dubry had a photo with him, but one of your heroes that you look at and you think, wow, I've managed to actually meet you. So, you know, it was a good after party. The celebrations are good, and then the open top bus today. It was for me. It was nice to see the fans literally enjoying that moment as well, because success was there many years ago, and it's starting to build, and to get that FA Cup and then to be in Europe, you could just see that there was a lot of excitement around the football club at the time.
Want to talk about Europe? There was one game in particular the next season, the 97-98, that is still talked about to this day, and that's the away game against Tromso with the terrible conditions.
Yeah.
Still surprising to this day that the game wasn't called off, but it wasn't. That was some night in Norway.
Oh, it was the thing is, when we was on the plane, it was snowing as we were landing, and we couldn't see the runway. And I'm thinking, how are we landing here? It was literally so. Everyone's thinking, are we going to be able to stay on the runway here when we land? But obviously, they do that week in, week out. So by the time we'd got there, it wasn't snowing, and they cleared the pitch, so it was quite. By come half time, it had pelted down, and we couldn't see the lines on the pitch. And I remember we was trying to play a brand of football that we were still used to, and it was impossible on that pitch. And I remember Rudy wanted to get me on, and he stood up, and he's literally, because I couldn't see the halfway line properly, I must have been about 4 yards away from it. And Rudy, they wouldn't stop the game. He's gone, what? He goes up, but he's got to be, okay. He's turned around and kicked what he thought was a snowball, and it was a rock covered in snow, and he actually broke his little toe. It was, yeah, and literally, I'm thinking, so I remember getting on, and it's quite funny because I look back on it, and I think the goals that were scored, there was from Luca, two of the passes come from me playing forward, and then Wisey puts the through ball through, and literally, because it was like, and then Sparky gets it, and Luca was amazing on that, and then the goals that he pops up with when we needed it. But then we showed our quality in the home leg, I think, after that. Literally, they couldn't live with what we were doing. But it shows you what the conditions can do to a football game, and to come through and get that, it was amazing, because I'm thinking if they'd have gone, it would have given them a massive uplift coming to us. But I think it was an amazing night, because just because of the conditions again, and the fans that were out there that had travelled, it was, amazing.
And it was an interesting run up to the final as well, where we would play Real Betis and we'd do well over there against them. Then we had the comeback against Vincenza at home, where they would score first, and then Hughes would score the equaliser with a fabulous finish, and then Zola with the header. You was involved that night as well. What was Stamford Bridge like that evening, especially with so much riding on it, and then the atmosphere that Stamford Bridge can generate?
The European nights, and not taking nothing away from the modern day fans now, but there was a lot of the hardcore fans back then from the shed end, and the European nights are great, even the Champions League nights of late. But when you're involved in that under the lights, and you can see every ball we're kicking, everything we're doing, the fans are 100% behind us, and if it ain't right, they're quick to tell us, which is what football is. So, but that night, you could just see it was a special occasion, and the way that we come back into that game and we're sparking, and that's when you can see players that have played in that level, that pressure, they just come to the forefront of it all, and you can just see, and they've been there and done it, and you could tell that with them too as well. And it was like a great learning experience for everyone in that.
Was it a case where sometimes in the dressing room where certain results or certain progressions to cup competitions were like that, was it a case of trying to put that into league form? Because you do get some teams nowadays that prioritize one thing over the other. Was there any sort of elements of that with under Rude at Chelsea, or was it just game by game?
I think there was a squad mentality, but I don't think it was set to a point that we were trying out. I think he wanted to win all competitions, which is rightly so. When you look at the squad, it's probably never as big as what they are now in terms of what we had. So you had to manage it differently. But, when you look at sports science back then, it wouldn't be, you played Saturday, you must miss Tuesday. It wasn't much talk about that. It was like, if you're fit, you're looking to play. And I think that's the difference between now and then. So we would literally, if you're fit, how do you feel? Yeah, it's stiff, right? You're ready, you're playing. And that was the way the squad was. And sometimes you might play, sometimes you might not, depending on probably more the eye than sports science, because it wasn't really around them. But it wasn't no emphasis on we've got to do better in the cups. It was just sometimes the cups lifted more, especially the European situations in the evening, the atmosphere. I don't know what it is. It's not that you're not trying any harder or differently. I just think the whole atmosphere is a lot different.
And a few months before that, Ruud Gullit was relieved of his duties and Vialli came in, and then you had the League Cup final success sort of earlier on as well. What was sort of the mood like in the camp with Ruud Gullit gone and Vialli taking over? Was it sort of obviously it must have been different for Gianluca, sort of being from the player and then becoming player manager? What was it like for the players?
I think it was quite smooth. I think the reason why everybody had a lot of love for Luca, um, of course, he would have had to change certain aspects of his character, but not a lot. The way he was as a person and the way he would manage people, he was still the same. He had a compassion about him, and he spoke to you with a compassion. So, even if he wasn't involved or you're not, or you knew it would hurt him. You felt like it hurt him having to tell you that it weren't, and he never changed in that sense. And I think that was the beauty of it. So, but he was strong enough to make decisions and knew what was what. He wasn't nobody's fool. We weren't like, yeah, don't think I'm a soft touch. I've got compassion and empathy and I'll deal with it at the right time. But when I'm going to make a decision, I'm going to make a decision. And it worked. And the team just seemed to just flow without feeling any disruption to Rudy going. Although it was a big loss, again, you still got a big name in charge that you respect. And it worked.
And in May of '98, Gianluca would name you on the bench for the Cup Winners' Cup final against Stuttgart. What was that conversation like between the two of you, and what stories have you got of that final?
That final, you when you know where you think we were before to where we got to the final with Gianluca, and I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, is this real? It's amazing. It was, and he told me that I was on the bench and he wasn't sure. And I think Danny Granville got the nod, and rightly so. And Danny had a great game in that game as well. And you look at it and you think, but that's the thing. As much as you're disappointed, you just know. And I can be disappointed for but to be involved in that still, and you never know it, where we'd been. Remember, like I've seen, as you've probably seen, and a lot of fans have seen, where we've been wanting this success and it hadn't quite been there. To see the club grow and to be there, you can look back and go, wow, we have come a long way in quite a short period of time. When you look at when you go from when you had Bobby to Ian to, all the way through. I remember being there when John Hollins was manager, so
Right, yeah.
Kerry was in the dressing room, and where we went from there, and that success what we had back in the 60s, I think it was, to where we are now, it's just it's well earned, and it's literally because the personnel that brought in, the managers that brought in, the way that we changed the style of football, everything within a culture started to change. And I think that is the benchmark of it all. Where the culture changed, everybody seemed to now see there was a winning mentality more within Chelsea.
Was there talk after that final of, okay, we've done well in these competitions, we're doing okay in the league, but we should push on and be more competitive in the Premier League and try and be challenging the likes of Arsenal and Manchester United?
Yeah, always. I don't think it was just about the European. I think with everything, you wanted to be a success. You wanted to emulate the teams of like United at the time, probably Liverpool that had won league titles, and Man United are winning the league, winning the cups. And whenever we played against them teams, that was the ironic thing. Whenever we played against them teams, we always did well. We always give them a game. I don't think I lost at Old Trafford when I was playing for Chelsea. I don't remember. We always seem to pull out a performance that was literally worthy of us being there. We didn't just turn up and hold on. And when Luca came, I think, and we started winning there, it sort of shows you where we were looking to go and what we believed in. And I think the league was a priority as much as the cup competitions. And we knew that when you're in Europe, there's more games. So it's going to be tougher. But I think it was never not to want to win the Premier League or to try and win the league. It was always every game we've got to try and win anyway under Luca, because he had that winning mentality around him.
The next season, 98-99 season, you didn't feature much until I think you played in the FA Cup games against Manchester United, the first game, and then the replay at Stamford Bridge. Was there conversations with Gianluca around this time of your career about the lack of game time and looking to see what would be in your future?
Yeah, it was. And he pulled me in and I could see what was happening. There was some, and he said to me, look, I don't think you're going to feature for me. So this is what it looks like. This is what my squad. And in all fairness, he done exactly what Glenn done. And he goes, look, but I think he thought I was going to be trouble for some reason when I weren't. I'm not sure where they got that from. And they ended up making me train with the reserves. I had no problem with that. But then every now and again, they'd ask me to come back and train with the first team because they needed a body. And I'm like, hold on, what's going on? And it got to a point where I go, look, I've got no problem, but this isn't doing me a favor because I'm training now with youth team players and you're now wanting me to keep up with first team sharpness. But so I'm not sure, can I come and train? I'm not. And they said to me, I think it was Graham and Ricks at the time, said to me, I don't think, we didn't think you'd want to. I went, what? It was such a weird conversation. Well, we thought you'd have the ump and want to be. I goes, you know me better than that. I'm not that person. I accept this is what football is. And then I ended up training with him and training well. And before you know it, like you said, I'm on the bench of United. I hadn't been involved. And then I remember getting on and having to try and stop Beckham crossing the ball. I think for about 15 minutes. And every time I blocked the cross, they got a corner. And I'm thinking, he's just going to whip that in with quality as well. So it was one of them ones. Beckham was unbelievable to play against because he just stop it on a dime, deliver. So, and we hadn't had a lot, but again, and the next thing I'm playing again, and it was sort of surreal, really. It really was because I've been in the wilderness, but then that's what I say to every young footballer: just train and keep your levels up because it's you never know. It's so up and down that 1 minute you could be surplus required, and 1 minute you never know. And as long as your levels are up, you just got to keep doing it for yourself. So yeah, it was an interesting year, that I should say.
In the summer of '99, you would end up leaving Chelsea to join Bradford City for a fee of, I believe it was £800,000. How did this move come about for you?
I think it was needed, and I think Luca was fair with it. It literally in the summer they just got promoted to the Premier League. I think Paul Jewell was the manager, obviously, of course, and they made a bid and it was accepted. And I'm glad it was accepted because as much as it hurt me to leave, don't get me wrong, I've spent the majority of my life from the age of 12 to when I left in 19. You going, but it was the right time for me to move on, and it was. As much as it was hard, it needed to be done. And then, yeah, it was just nice to be trying to get back and play regular football again.
Now, fast forward all the way forward towards 2011, be like a little cycle. You would end up returning to Chelsea, but this time as starting off as a academy coach. What was that change for you like from, first of all, from returning to the club as a coach from obviously being a player, and what was the transition like for you as a coach sort of going into Chelsea?
It was actually 2009 I come back. The ironic thing is my sports teacher at the time, Bob Osborne, he was my sports teacher at Hounslow Manor where I used to go to school, and he was the one who got me the trial at Chelsea. And ironically, when I stopped playing football, I took my son's grassroots team, Old Isworthians, and was coaching them. And he used to come and watch. And he goes, "You need to come into the academy and speak to Neil because of what you're doing. You're fitting." And I wasn't sure. I was quite hesitant because, you hear things that kids are spoiled, this or that, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm not sure. And so I went in 2009 and was still doing part-time grassroots, going in the evenings and started doing. So then it became full-time in 2011 and literally just progressed from there. And my transition, in all fairness, was quite good because I'd already been coaching grassroots and taking my own badges leading into it. So different because the caliber of player that you've got and the care what they get to what we had, it was actually nice to see. It was a lot different from what I thought it would be. Yeah, the duty of care with all of the academy players from Neil Bath put in place is amazing. It really is. So it was quite a smooth transition based on the people that were working there. And there's no airs and graces with me. And I wasn't trying to climb and be this and be that. I just wanted to learn, which is the biggest thing for me.
Because you worked under some interesting names as well from Chelsea. One of them was Dermot Drummy.
Yeah.
How much of sort of like coaching did you learn from him, and what kind of a coach was he?
Dan was very expressive. He was, we got him. He came in from Arsenal, and he wanted free flowing football. And I think he was in line with the philosophy at the time. If you think about the Arsenal team, the Invincible team, they were playing a brand of football that everybody wanted to try and emulate. And as an academy, that was what we were trying to do as a goal as well. Play a brand of football that was get it down, look to play out from the back. You know, he had this way around him of he could man manage, get the character, be tough, be strong. But there was an abundance of coaches within there, from Adi Vivash to Joe Edwards. You know, at the time, I think Jason Cundy had just left when I'd got there. I think he was doing a little bit in building. I think, you know, there was an abundance of older coaches, Frank O'Brien, you know, Cyril Davis, these, even Bob Osborne, got everybody in check and set. There was a culture there, and everybody knew what the goal was, and it was to try and get players in the first team or get players' careers. But Dermot was an exceptional coach and an exceptional person as well.
What role would you say you got the best out of you in terms of your skills and your way as a coach? Was it being an assistant manager or as a manager?
Good question. As an assistant, I knew my role, but it wasn't just to agree and go, yes, yes, yes. So I've been an assistant to Derm, I've been an assistant to Joe, I've been an assistant to AD, even an assistant in Holland when I went over there for a year. When I come back from Holland, that's when I got the chance to lead the 18s for a year, then got the chance to lead the 23s at the time before they become 21s. And everything I'd learned from everybody that I'd seen, I could emulate. And it was nice to actually be in charge, if I'm totally honest, and implement ideas that you believe in, because sometimes you can put on an idea to a head coach and they may not want to, and you go, that's fine. So it's quite nice to be able to implement ideas that I wanted to do as a head coach. So I would say head coach for me, but having that experience of both, knowing that anything comes up in perspective future, I've done both, if that makes sense. So I'm ready to do both at a senior level as a head coach as well. So it's hard to say what was better. I love both, and I love just developing the players as well.
Because while you was head coach, I believe it was the under 21s team, they would go on to win the Premier League 2 title. What was that experience like for you, sort of being involved in that and having the young players, might even mention a few, that would go on to have some interesting careers for themselves?
You know, amazing. I think when we look back, I looked back on that the other day, and I think I put a little post on literally where we played Man City. It was a COVID year, and that year we didn't lose a game. So it wasn't so much that we'd won it. There was about 3 games to go, but because it had to come to a halt, everybody agreed, but we hadn't got beat. I remember when I look back on that game and you look at the coach of Man City at the time, is you're going, right, Cole Palmer's playing, you go, so, and you're just looking at it and you go, wow. And what we were doing at the time was what everybody had been doing. We were doing the inverted fullback. We were popping in. We had Henry Lawrence popping in from left back in and Tino dropping out. And it was just, it was what everybody's looking to do. But we played a brand of football all year, and they were amazing as a group of players. And I think to win that was just a credit to not just to them, but also a credit to all the coaches that have touched them growing up. Because, you know, you get them at the 21s or the 23s or so, and literally, but everybody forgets that there's so many coaches in that building that have had a hand in helping them kids develop. But mainly the players with their aptitude, they're the ones for me that have to take it on board and deliver. And that was the culture that was set. So, you know, great, you get accolades for winning, but it's the club, the whole club. And then Tino Livramento, wish he'd stayed. You know, he goes on, and we get Cole Palmer, so we can't argue in terms of that. So it's not too bad.
Of the players that you worked with, especially that particular season, which ones did you feel in your gut that you thought they could end up doing well for Chelsea?
If I'm looking at that, the ones that it's hard to say because I've coached a lot of players throughout that. But if I'm looking at that period, Tino Angering would have been one for me. I think he had a lot of injuries, but what an immense talent that kid is when he was fit. The power, the strength, the skill, the ability. You know, Billy Gilmore went on. Obviously, he's gone on to things as well. He was another player that you look at. In the second year, I had Mark Gurhey. Look where he is now at T Lamptey. Yeah, I had T Lamptey as well. You know, and the thing is, like I said, for Chelsea, if we couldn't get him in the first team, it was about forging careers for players. And I think that's one thing that nobody can take away from the Academy of Chelsea and what Neil Bath created, is that you can look back on how many careers we have forged for players that have been involved in our academy. and there's so many. And it's a credit to all the coaching staff that have worked, that have come and gone, and Neil setting up that culture. And also, you've got to say a massive thanks to Frank as well, Frank Lampard, for when we had that opportunity, breading them, getting them youngsters in, getting them in, so people could actually showcase and see your Tammys, your Ficaros, even Ruben getting all the game time. All these players that we've got and had, Callum, it was just that, wow, for that Reece, you just look at it and go, yeah.
And your role would change once again at Chelsea. A couple of years later, you would end up being the lone player. I've got it written down. The lone player coach. What did this role entail for you, and how different was it from coaching to that?
It was a lot different in terms of he wasn't on the grass, but saying that, come pre-season, we'd have a big group of players that were going out on loan. So come the pre-season time, you would end up taking a group for training that weren't first team group. So that was nice in that sense. And then it was really being like a mentor to them, from the players that you'd worked with previous years, knowing that they're going out on loan, you had a relationship with them. So getting up, getting out, going to clubs, watching them train, speaking to the managers, are they doing okay? Keeping up on the phone, going and watching play, and writing reports. It's football, but on a different level. And I think enjoying it, getting out, meeting people, watching games, but still not the same as being on the grass. But I think it was a decision that needed to be done. The group was getting younger from 21s. It was becoming more like 18s. And I think I needed a new challenge in terms of that, So it was and like I said, because I say it was so young, that year, the last year, we nearly got relegated that last year based on having a really, 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 really young group. And I look back on that group, and I think we had 8 scholars in that group. 4 of them or 5 of them were first years. I think you look at Brody, Lewis Hall, Charlie Webster. So the group was playing. They didn't even have a chance to really. Some of them play under 18s football. And Lewis Hall played 56 games that season. 56 over both age groups. And what we developed out of him, which he didn't like, was a left back, because he was a centre midfielder.
He didn't want to be a left back, did he? No.
But we, at the time when he came into us, we went, I see him there. He looks so comfortable there. I don't think he's looking back on it now. I hope he's not. He's one of England's left back. But, sometimes, it happened to me. It happens. You think you're playing that position and you end up playing a position that you never knew. I was never a left back in my life, never a defender in my life. But you end up playing there because there ain't a left back at the club. And am I going to say no? No chance. And it was just nice to see that.
How crucial, to touch on this, for not just Premier League clubs, but all clubs, to have that loan manager there, because a lot of clubs now, they do send players out on loan, whether they're even like first team regulars that can't get a game, or young players that need first team experience. How crucial is that loan manager having the communication skills to speak to the first team manager or the other 21s manager and liaise with them about these particular players, but also the communication between the loan manager and the player?
Massively important. I think when you're getting them ready for the next step in football from the 21s level, it's either going to be it's league football. So if it's League 2, League 1, could be abroad, but they've got to know what the fundamentals are, and they've also got to understand that if they're not playing, how do they deal with that? So yeah, there can be rules in place that he has to play this and that, but as a manager, you don't want your hands tied if someone's not performing for whatever reasons. And that's why when we look at it, our job is to break it down, look at clips that I think you can do this better. This is that. What do you think? But first of all, it's about talking to the player and getting his feedback on what he says and see how honest he is with things. Relationship's massive. And I think, because if you're away on loan and it's not going well and you've got no one with you support-wise, it can be a lonely place for a young kid. Especially if you've been living in London or you've been living at home and all of a sudden now you're in Europe or you're now living up north. And it's not always as easy to, you can have family support, which is great. But when it comes to football, you want to know that someone's there talking sense and making you understand that it's a process that, you're going to go through ups and downs. And in football, managing the highs is easy, but managing the lows, once you come through that, you'll become a better person. So it's massively important. Because if you think about the progress as well of players when they do well, when they come back, are they ready? Like Ian Matson, was he ready? Nearly ready. So he's a
Yeah,
prime
yeah.
example of why that relationship, when we have communications with all the staff, what do we think? This is what I think. There's a possibility he's got a chance. So it is important.
I want to change course if I can now. We're sort of approaching the end of the interview now, Andy. And what one aspect I did want to talk about, which I am glad wasn't around in the 90s or the noughties, was VAR. What's your opinion on it? Are you a fan of it? Is there anything about it that you would change?
Um, I think it takes away a lot for me. I think we grew up in an era where the excitement in the stands, and if it was offside, sometimes you just have to accept that it's what it was, or then close margins. It takes away sometimes that attacking prowess of, and back in the day, the good centre forwards could probably cheat a little bit. Righty was the best at it, play offside, come back and then go. In this day and age, you'd have to be absolutely perfect because if his toe was there, he's offside. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I think the process of it, because it's a big money business at the moment, which I totally understand, I just think it takes so long. And I think because of the mistakes that have happened over the course of so many seasons where they've got it wrong for whatever reason, and you think, how? I don't know. It's a tough one, but I think whatever it's here to stay. It doesn't matter what we think. I think it's here to stay. I think he showed that last night now where you've got the first time in the last two games where the official can actually go over a tannoy and explain the decision. Football fans ain't thick. They understand if it's close and why it's offside, even when they're watching the game, or he could be. But it takes away. You never know when to celebrate, do you? That's the
Of
problem.
course, yeah.
That pause. Is it a goal? Not. And it's like, oh, here we go, here we go. And before you know it, everyone's. And you want that atmosphere to be. It's a goal. That's it. It's done. Can't change the decision. That's what it is. What goes next? And I think that's the thrill of football.
One thing I did want to touch with you about is Chelsea of 2025 now. What have you made of Chelsea this season under Enzo Maresca?
I think under Enzo, I think the team, I think from last year, the squad, they're in a much better place. I think he's a good coach. I think the ideas that he's bringing through are coming to light. I think what we've got, which we haven't had since Eden, we've got someone in Cole Palmer that can create that little bit of magic. The magic man is, I think, you look at clubs over the years, they've always had one somewhere. Arsenal had Henry at the time, or Bergkamp. We had Hazard. We've had Franco Zola. We've had that magic man that can create magic and moments out of nowhere. And the team's gelling and working around that. I see. I'm very pleased with how they're working at the moment. I think the last few results have been a little bit indifferent, and I think they'll work that out. Like the Premier League can be unforgiving, and once teams work out a way to play against you, it's now what do you do next to combat that? And I think that's where we'll see. We have to see something probably a little bit different in terms of teams that might want to sit back and look to counter us. What does that look like? But again, very impressed. And I think we're at a place where not many people would have thought we would have been. And I think if we can have a run like we did, you never know. You never know, because I still see mishaps going up above us. I still see that could happen as well.
Andy, last question from me. How would you look back on your time at Chelsea, both as a player and as a coach?
Absolutely loved it. When I look back and I think it was 16, like for me, when I was there from the age of 12 to I think it was just under 16 years as a player from 12 to when I left. And it was like 17 years as a coach. So the majority of my life has been Chelsea Football Club. So you think 36 years or literally giving everything that you possibly can, whenever you can, to Chelsea has been a major part. So I'm very thankful for everything they've given me. I'm very thankful for the support. I'm very thankful in terms of being able to do something I love as a kid. But it's nice to see where the club is now and may keep going and pushing forward and bring more success for the fans and for the players as well and all the staff that work there.
Well, Andy, I'd like to thank you for being on the show today. It's been a pleasure to have you on. I could listen to your coaching sort of stories and even your philosophy all night. So thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you back at the bridge quite soon as well.
Appreciate having me on, Keith, and I wish you well, mate, and a happy new year. All right.